are powers on Earth too hidden to be seen, and conspiracies too vast to comprehend. For years, the world has seen fact distorted, reality manipulated, and the truth concealed. Join the Pierre Sabak podcast to uncover the real meanings behind ancient aliens and their symbolism.
Hi, this is Pierre Sabak, unlocking the keys to the mysteries. Now I want to look at something which is very controversial. This is the idea of angelic abductors. As I've said before, the angels themselves are deemed as being alien or strange, and this is important to emphasize because as I've mentioned before in my various different videos, the Aramaic word zar, which is an angel, can also mean one who is strange. It also means a visitor, one who is alien. Now the word zar itself is related to sira, which is a boat or a vessel. Now the Hebrew word sira, boat, is a diptych paranamasia on the word sira, the Arabic word for Sirius or Sirius. The scorching one, the shining ones, and the star itself is identified with the seraphim, serapha, which is fire, seraph, which is a serpent, a reptilian species, which is correlated with panspermia and the planting of humans on the earth. Now I think what's very interesting is that the angels themselves are correlated with abduction, and I think that this is interesting because certainly within modern ufology, the abduction phenomenon itself has been very much undermined or reassessed in light of modern research, and a lot of protagonists or commentators have argued that the abduction phenomenon is just really is a modern component to the UFO phenomenon, and itself is very problematic. Now I want to try and readdress some of these criticisms and actually argue that this idea that angels are aliens, because the two terms are interchangeable, that they are identified in the ancient traditions with abduction, and this goes back a very, very long way. Now, I think what's also very interesting and what we need to actually emphasize is that we can see within the ancient traditions that the cherubim, which are a proto-human species of angels, are typically identified with the seraphim, which are a non-human angel, and so they typically are represented together. So for example, within Greek and Hellenistic symbolism, angels are sometimes shown to be seated on the throne chariot. The wheel itself is combined with the serpent, which would be the seraphic host, which would represent the wheels. In this case, this would be a flying saucer and would be then linked in together with a human-looking angel, typically carrying a sword. So therefore, kerev, a sword in the Hebrew, is related to cherub, which is an angel. And these are again related to vessels in the etymology, carib, which would be a type of vessel. Now, both the cherubim and the seraphim tend to work together, and they are culpable with human theft. And we do find this certainly within iconography. So, for examples, you can see an angel with a sword, and they will be carrying in their chariots. They will have children within the chariots, and this idea that they're working with the seraphim because the wheel and the seraph are combined together suggests that that these two groups of angels or aliens, however you want to define this, are actually working in collusion and that they work together. And I think that this is a very interesting idea because when we look at the cherubim and the seraphim, and we look at the fact that they are culpable of human theft within the ancient world, we can see that when we translate this into modern ufology and also into black ops and more conspiratorial elements within ufology, we can see that there is a direct association with MILABs. Now, for those who are not familiar with the word MILAB, it's used within ufology to refer to military abductions. Now, some commentators within ufology have argued that the MILABs are related to a conspiracy with the military, either that the military are trying to fake this idea of aliens in order to make people more paranoid, or to give more power away to the government, so that we can have a one world government. Now, these are all interesting ideas, but when we actually go back to the origin of this idea of Milab, and this idea that human elements and non-human elements are either working against each other or working in collusion together, then this goes back to a very ancient and a very occult tradition. So as we can see, that contrary to the modern interpretation of earthly abductors, the covert definition of Milab is in fact clandestine, and it denotes the angelic tradition, or the naval or classical tradition as I define this. And we can see then that the angels traditionally are deemed as being an armed force, so they are members of military crew members of vessels. So for example, we can see then that the acronym MILAB, which refers to military abductions, we can see that the term military is very important within the Semitic traditions of the angelic host. So for example, in the Hebrew, the word Savi, which is military, is a variant on the Hebrew word Sava, which is army, which is transliterated in the Old Semitic as Sabaoth. Now, Sabaoth is important because Sabaoth refers to the angelic host. So the angelic host are seen as being both military, and they're seen as being part of an army. In addition, the etymologies of Savi and military is related to Teva, which is an ark or a vessel. So we can also see that there is a connotation of a naval army or a naval military. Now, the word Sabaoth, the angelic host, is a cognate, or is closely identified with Yahweh Sabaoth. Yahweh Sabaoth is translated as Lord of the Host. I will keep that definition for the moment, but the connotation of Yahweh has a very strong connotation of a seraphim, and I want to go into this idea in a later series. So Yahweh Sabaoth, God, or the Elohim, he commands or presides over a naval host. Now, within the symbology, this naval vessels on the naval host are represented as spinning wheels. These spinning wheels take on the descriptions of shining spinning wheels, which are consistent within modern vernacular of a flying saucer. Now, these then, the angelic host is based upon an angelological tradition. It's based upon a classified tradition. Now, the abbreviation Milab predominantly it imputes an army and is an expression connoting the host. Specifically, the cherubim, a plural word denoting the angels, literally the sword carriers are those who are armed. Now, operating together, the cherubim, which as I've argued before is a proto-human angel, they work together with the seraphim. So often the cherubim and the seraphim within the biblical tradition, they will appear together. And the seraphim are non-human angels. And when they appear together, they are traditionally shown to be part of a military or a naval itinerant. So these are a group which move around and which inform mankind. They are deemed as being emissaries, and they communicate with the ship of state. And so they are part of what we would describe as the political structure. Within the ancient world, this would be the exopolitical structure. So we can see that this is part of what I refer to as the scatological discourse. In this respect, scaphology is the study of angelic vessels and their relationship to the angelic tradition or the angelic sailors. So as we've said before, this tradition then is correlated with the Ophanim wheels and the angelic sailors. Now, these sailors were deemed to be watchers, and I think it's useful for us also to go into a little bit of detail about ancient alien abduction, because the two are often seen to be related together. As we've said before, military abductions, within modern ufology, the aliens, human and non-human elements, traditionally thought to, the military elements are traditionally thought to originate from the earth, but certainly within the ancient and more earlier traditions, the military sections of the humans were seen to be a separate angelic species which were working together with a non-human species. So, for example, if we look at ancient alien abduction, the thesis that alien abduction is a modern construct, I've argued that this is not true, that this goes back to an occult tradition. It's very ancient, okay? But we find this certainly within science fiction films. The science fiction films are not new ideas. These are ideas which are represented from the scatological tradition, from this idea of angelic vessels. That's basically a deconstruction of Milab, and how Milab actually comes together and coalesces in the modern tradition of alien abduction, but also how the Milab tradition goes back to a much older source, and that we find these sources within the Apocrypha traditions, within the Hermetic traditions, within the biblical and Quranic sources. Right, thank you very much for listening. If you've enjoyed this video, then please give me a thumbs up, and please let's make this a better world. Thank you very much for listening. This is Pierre Sabak. Thank you.